Hello, everyone. My name is Gabriel Arroyo, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist located in Southern California. Today's video is going to be a continuation of our Psych in Real Life series, where we interview members within our community to talk about mental health related topics and coping skills that they use in their own everyday lives. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our weekly videos on mental health related topics and coping skills for you to apply in your own everyday life. All right. Today's Psych in Real Life video, we have Anthony Carson. Anthony, do you mind introducing yourself for all of us, please?
Not at all. How you guys doing? My name is Anthony Carson. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the owner of Hope Avenue Counseling Services, and we're located in Colton, California.
Awesome. So we're both licensed marriage and family therapists, and we both work in the Inland Empire. That's great. You know, how many years have you been practicing, Anthony?
So I've been practicing for 7 years, but I didn't just get here overnight, man. It's been a long battle to get to just this spot of being a therapist, and to be doing it for 7 years. I feel humble, feel blessed.
Awesome. Well, what actually got you into the field?
So let me tell you a quick little story, because I grew up in the inner city, and as I grew up, there weren't many role models. As I looked around, there weren't many individuals who were in the workforce, in the business sector. So I really didn't have a blueprint for how, to climb up the ranks. So that was the climate. But my first introduction to therapy came as I was working at a group home. And I'll tell you a quick story about it. So I was working at a group home, and a therapist comes. He sees the kid at the group home. There's 6 kids there. He's seen all the kids. So I spoke to the owner. I asked him, I said, hey, how much do you pay this guy? And he said, I paid $100. So me, I'm so fresh to the situation. I said, yeah, for all of them, right? He says, no, for each one. And that was my introduction with the light bulb going off. But I didn't stop there. I spoke with a couple of the kids. I wanted to know a little bit about their experience and see how, they felt about the therapist as well as therapy. And they would give me comments like, man, I hate therapy. I don't like talking to him. I feel like you're a better therapist than him. And that added to that light bulb going off that maybe I can do this. And then I was already going to school, took a psychology class, really thought it was exciting. And the rest was history. After there, I just kept going. That was my pursuit, to become a therapist.
Yeah, that's amazing. You and I have talked about how each one of us have gotten into the field. And I think that we've had the conversation that it's never by chance. We just fell into this like it was meant to be. Like, what do you think?
I truly feel like it was meant to be. The hardships, the experiences that I've experienced, I'll speak from personally, and you probably experienced. I feel like it was preparation for where we're at now, to have a more compassionate heart, a better understanding to what's going on, and really just to be a part of the change.
Yeah, I love it. We talk about specialties in mental health a lot. And I've mentioned my specialty is working with chronic illness, with individuals with chronic illness, and just helping them cope, because that's what got me into the field. But I'm curious to talk about what your specialty is.
So let me tell you about how I got here first, because my specialty now wasn't always my specialty. When I first started, I thought I wanted to work with the at-risk teen population, maybe around 14 to let's say 25. I was passionate about that population. Then I started working with that population. And I realized it's not that I wasn't passionate about it. It just, I was at a different stage in how I wanted to do therapy, and it wasn't where they were, right? I was at a stage where I was ready for someone who identified already that there was something that needed addressing, that, things haven't been working in the past, and they're open to a new way of doing things. So that has now morphed into working with individuals. So my tagline is, I work with angry adults, emotionally disturbed individuals, and disconnected families. So what that means is I primarily work with individuals who struggle with anger management issues, and the emotional disturbance aspect of it is individuals who really get agitated easily. Oftentimes have a black and white way of seeing things, right? There's right and wrong, but that gray area is hard to fall in between. So I work with a lot of individuals who may be experiencing things like bipolar, anxiety, depression, PTSD. It ranges, but that the person that I typically see has some type of emotional disturbance going on.
Gotcha. And, so you talked about like what you thought your original specialty was going to be and how it morphed into this. So what got you into this specialty?
So I was working at a previous agency, and we got a training on DBT, and that was my introduction to mindfulness, another way of managing a particular caseload. So I was having clients who were a little difficult to deal with, and the clinical term was borderline personality disorder. I had a lot of those clients, and I ran into a lot of roadblocks in session, and I was just like, man, we get to a certain point, but then we kind of, this is as far as we go. And I had a great supervisor back then, and she provided us access to some trainings. And from there, my introduction to DBT kind of spawned off to focusing. I would say majority of my work is from a mindfulness perspective.
Gotcha.
And that's also integrated into DBT. So that's, once I learned a little bit about DBT, a little more about mindfulness, it kind of spawned off to, my specialty now in how I work with clients. Yeah.
Awesome. So, you mentioned DBT, but how is it that you do help your clients in regulating emotions and specifically anger?
So I don't necessarily use DBT with all of my clients, but I do use mindfulness practices with all of my clients. So it typically starts off like this. In the first session, we're doing our intake, we're getting a little information, but mainly what we're trying to do is we're trying to build some rapport, trying to get to know you a little bit better, and try to figure out what are the issues that are presented, right? Next few sessions, we'll talk a little bit more, similar situation, get to know you a little better, figure out what's going on. And then after that, we start with some mindfulness practices. And the first thing I would start with is, what are your triggers? What sets you off? What pisses you off? What makes you upset? What makes you happy? And that starts the whole process of thinking mindfully. Because when I ask that question, you're forced to think a little bit, go internally a little bit, and figure out, how do I feel about this situation?
Yeah.
How is this affecting me? And those are some of the foundational principles of mindfulness.
Okay, great. And, we talk about mindfulness a lot in this channel. But we have the expert. You work in this. This is your specialty. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more, because I'm sure the viewers ask, well, okay, yeah, we've heard about mindfulness. Yeah. We know about mindfulness, but what is it going to do? Like, I'm angry. I know I'm angry. I'm mindful that I'm angry.
Right.
How is this going to help me?
Let me take you through something real quick. So there's two main components with mindfulness. One is going to be your ability to be aware. Right? Awareness, that's part of mindfulness. The other part is going to be acceptance, right? So let me take you through what I was just talking about. So the awareness aspect, can I be aware of what's going on in any given moment, right? Whatever the environment is calling for, just being aware of it. Can I accept, or can I be aware, of the thoughts that I'm having, the feelings that I may be having in any given moment, and whatever that is, can I not judge it? So if I'm happy, I'm just happy. If I'm angry, I notice that I'm angry, right? There's no need to put a label on it at this point. And then on the other side of it, whatever I notice in the environment, whatever it is that I'm thinking or feeling, I can just accept it from moment to moment. These are going to be the foundational principles of being able to be mindful through each situation, because each situation is exactly that. It's situational. So we handle it from a mindful lens, but it's from a situational perspective, moment to moment perspective. And if I can be mindful, that means I'm going to be present in the given moment and take in everything that's going on, as opposed to be focused on the past and what's happened a few minutes ago, a few weeks ago, a few years ago, or focusing on the future and what's to come, what's next. But if I can root myself in this present moment, be aware of what's going on, from a emotional perspective, from a cognitive perspective, and be able to accept what that is and not judge it. That's essentially what mindfulness is all about.
Yeah. Yeah, very well said. You know, and that's what we talk about in the channel. And we talk about mindfulness almost being just like a window of opportunity for us to make a calculated decision of how we're going to respond to that situation. And you definitely can't do it if you're bringing up stuff from the past or if your mind's out into the future. So I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, I want to talk about something with you, and we've talked about this a little bit. When we originally scheduled this interview, we had the focus to just be about anger management skills, and which are great. I think a lot of people could benefit from them, but the world is coming to a head with a very hot topic right now, and a hot topic that you have had experience in, and even myself, I've had experience in it. And I'm talking about, you know, the prejudice and the racism and what's just going on in our country right now. That's all coming to a head. And I want to give you the platform and some time to speak on how you're experiencing this, how you're coping with it, and how you would advise anybody else to manage the many emotions we're all experiencing with the hurt, the anger, the frustration during these difficult times.
I love the fact that you said the many emotions, right? The first one that comes up for many of us, anger, right? But there's a ton of other emotions that we may be experiencing in addition to just the anger. For me personally, went from anger to encouraged to frustrated to excited to passionate to compassionate. There's a whole bunch of things that you may be feeling through this experience. And for me as a Black man, we're kind of tired as Black folks of talking about this issue over and over again, but we're encouraged right now because this isn't a black and white issue. This is a humanitarian issue. This is all of us. And really the main issue is when you see something wrong, say, hey man, that's not right. You shouldn't do that. So for me, I've seen tons of people come and congregate together to speak against oppression, to speak against police brutality, to speak against all of the negative things that are going on from a systemic perspective, where Black and Latinos are being disproportionately affected. I'm partly encouraged, though, to see that these conversations are happening. I'm discouraged by the acts that caused us to get to this point. I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm frustrated about that. And we'll work through a little exercise to address that in a second.
Okay.
But I want to just communicate the other side, not just the anger, because I've been able to work through the anger. Obviously, this is my specialty. I can manage that stuff. So I'll provide a few tips in just a minute. However, what's going on, I'm really encouraged to see that we're fighting and standing up. But also, I believe that a lot has to happen for actual change to happen. So I'm not jumping to judgment at this moment. I believe that there's a lot of things that has to happen in terms of reforms. Some of the laws need to change. A lot of the things that are disproportionately affecting these inner city communities. It just takes time for change to happen. However, this is a different climate, and it feels a little bit different with the aid of just all ethnicities when it comes to protests, when it comes to speaking out against, the horrible and horrific sighting of George Floyd. And we all had a visceral response from that. It doesn't matter your ethnicity, black, white, green, or blue. You felt something when you seen that video. And of course, the anger is there, the frustration is there. But I'm encouraged to believe that we'll continue to have these dialogues. And I want to thank you, Gabe, for creating the space to allow me here to communicate my position. And in hopes that, we provoke more conversations. And a lot of the Black community, we say, we're tired of talking. We've been talking about it for a while. Very, very, I express that same sentiment. However, I also believe that we have to play a part in having the conversation as to how people perceive us.
Yeah.
How do we come off in certain situations to aid that perception? Not that we need to change anything. It's just a conversation. What needs to change is the judgments, the prejudgments, the writing people off, treating people as if they don't matter. And everybody matters, but at this moment, Black lives matter. Disproportionately, being killed in the streets, being murdered. George Floyd is the most recent one, but there's stories and there's countless other individuals. We can go back to Sandra Bland. A lot of people don't remember her name, but remember Sandra Bland. And if you don't know who Sandra Bland is, look up who Sandra Bland is. Great story. Absolutely great story. Ahmaud Ashbury, recently running down the street in Georgia, getting gunned down by 2 white men. There's outrage, there's pain, there's anger. Don't get me wrong, but we can work through that. And I'll point a few steps and a few tips in just a second.
Thanks for sharing that. I'm curious, and I want to hear more about how we work through those feelings. I know I shared with you that there's a lot of these feelings for myself, and we shared stories of prejudice that we've experienced in our own lives. Both of us have experienced our hair, right? Like a majority of my life, I've been afraid to shave my head because I don't want to give more ammunition for racially profiling me. And the same experiences you've had with, you talked about your hair and other experiences. Can you talk a little bit more about what that's looked like?
Sure. Let me talk a little bit about the hair, and then we'll talk about some other stuff. For you, it's cutting your hair down. For me, it was letting my hair grow. Some would call it nappy, or it's not corporate or professional or appropriate in this corporate space. But the fact that we have to think about that speaks to the systemic issue at play now, right? So the fact as being a person of color, you have to have thoughts that are different. You think a little bit differently. If you go into a certain environment, you're having thoughts about yourself. Do I fit in? Or is this a comfortable space? Hey, am I making someone else uncomfortable? So in a lot of times, we have to worry about if we're making the white population uncomfortable. And that's uncomfortable in itself, right? Because there isn't this freedom to essentially be yourself. We have to conform to a certain level of expectation. And conforming is to a white populace, because oftentimes that's our bosses. That's the individuals who are providing the job. That's the individual who has that position of, dare I say, power or authority. So we capitulate to those demands. But you and I both talked about a little bit. At this point for me, I'm in a place where we're actually our own bosses, where we've come from a particular environment, and if we choose to grow our hair out, or dare I say, cut our hair, we have that choice. We have that freedom. But isn't that what America is built on? Two words that come up for me are liberty and justice. Liberty is that freedom to do, whatever you kind of feel. There's latitude to be you, to do the things that you feel make you happy, right? That's what America is about. And then justice, standing for what's right. And that's where a big part of what's going on in our system is at play, where people weren't standing up for what was right. And I think the George Floyd situation just brings a optical experience to this isn't right. Let's stand up. And I digress a little bit from the hair, a little bit, but I'm just speaking to the experience in general.
Yeah.
Right. These are things that we have to think about that other populations and other ethnicities, they don't.
Yeah, I think that you hit it all on point of what we experience. And, you know, and I want to throw it out there that, and I've said this to you before, but like, yeah, I've experienced prejudice as Hispanic male. But even with those experiences, I understand and appreciate that there is still a difference even between me being brown and you being black and with the black community. And, you know, I just want to know like how you cope and how can you advise others that are experiencing these difficult things to urge them and help them to cope with this.
No, I love that. That's a great question. That's a great question. The first thing I would say is just like, let's conduct our personal inventory. Let's just start there. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is just check in with yourself. How are you feeling? How does this impact you? Are you pissed off? Are you outraged? Are you upset? Are you frustrated? The reason why I'm asking that question is because that gives us a starting point. Where are we at? And let's just speak for anger, since a bunch of people in the world right now are just outraged. They're angry. They're upset. And they're tired of things being the way it is. So let's say on the continuum. 1, not so angry. 10, very angry. Right? So this check-in is going to allow you to identify where you are on the scale. 10, I'm super upset. I'm pissed off. All right, so we're going to have to take some more drastic measures. 3 or 4, maybe I have a little more space to be a little more compassionate with myself. Maybe I can calm myself down. I could take a little time to calm myself down. But if you're at a 10, we're taking drastic measures. So the first step is to check in. How are you feeling today? What is that? Where's it coming from? Is this from yesterday? Is this from a week and a half ago, where we witnessed a black man murdered, essentially? Is this coming from 400 years ago? Is this coming from a month ago when another black man was killed? Where is this coming from? Right? So the more that we can kind of distill down, where is this coming from? This is creating the roadmap, because it's what's happening is we're able to identify the pain that has not healed. Right? So the first step, figuring it out. Where's it coming from? And then here's the next thing. Let's identify some of the thoughts that come along with it. Some of the thoughts may be, this is unfair. Here we go again. Or a feeling of powerlessness. There's nothing I can do about this. Whatever those thoughts, after that comes some feelings. If you feel powerless, maybe you don't do anything. Maybe you don't get involved. Right? If you feel angry, maybe you go out there and you handle your anger in an unorderly fashion, like looting. Maybe you get into confrontations and it's a verbal outburst, or maybe it turns into a physical fight. So it's going to start with our ability to understand that our thoughts are going to lead to some feelings. Here this goes again. Where are these feelings coming from? Is it this current situation? Is it the past? Is it a future situation that you were trying to prevent from occurring? So every time it's going to be a subtle reflection on yourself where you ask yourself a question. And when you ask yourself a question, it creates some distance between you and what's currently going on. So these are the tips that I'm giving you, and it's really to create that space. Okay? Let me give you tip number 3. Tip number 3 is called white space. I got it from the book called Blink with Malcolm Gladwell. And essentially what white space is the point between something happening and your response to it. So an example, let's say Gabe and I we're driving on the freeway. We're on the 215 freeway coming from San Bernardino, going into Colton. You're driving in a Ferrari. I'm driving in a little clunker. You're going about 90 miles an hour. I'm going about 65. We both have a cell phone on our laps. The cell phone rings. We both look down. But what we don't realize is that traffic is coming to a screeching halt. By the time we look up, you don't have much time to respond, because that's what we're talking about. What you do is you react. Your reaction is just one way: brake, brake, and brake again. For me, I'm driving a little slower. I'm going to be able to respond. I may be able to pull to the right, may be able to pull to the left. I may be able to pump my brake, get my e-brake. I may have a concoction going on, right? But the thing is I have more time to respond. So translate that back to our current situation. You're pissed off, you're upset. You could react and you can loot, you can beat people up, you can get involved in the negative aspect of this whole purpose, or you can create some space. And the more you create space, you're going to ask yourself a question. How is this impacting me? How am I feeling right now in this given moment? What is the accurate response that I want to make in this given moment? The longer you take to answer those questions, the greater white space you possess. The greater the white space you possess, the better the response that you'll make. Essentially, think about your actions. That's what we're talking about. The longer you can think about it and process it, you're going to respond from your higher self. So that's step number 3. And lastly, it's let's create a plan to deal with our stuff. So what that looks like is I'm dealing with anger. I may need some professional assistance. I'm dealing with anger. I may need to acquire some additional tools. I'm dealing with anger. I may need to speak to a trusted individual. So obviously therapy is going to be at the top of the scale, but as we work down, there are people that you can work through this stuff with. And some of these practical tools are just check in to how you're feeling, understand what the heck that is, ask yourself a few questions as to what's going on, where is it coming from, and lastly, use a little white space. Because if you can create some white space, you'll create a space between you and the situation, and you'll find the right answer, right? Because that's your higher self. If you can think about what you're going to do before you do it, you'll always do a better thing than if you didn't.
Yeah. I like it. I think, something that I appreciate about you, Anthony, is your whole demeanor and your approach to things is just so calming and soothing. Like, so I could definitely appreciate that clients will absolutely benefit from these skills and just talking with you. I think a question that might pop up with this whole approach is, because this is something I even thought about while working through this exercise, is we'll have waited, right? And that's a lot of people's perspective right now is I have waited. And, I think that, and maybe this is the answer that you already said, but it's all about moment to moment, right? Well, the waiting was waiting 400 years ago, right? We were waiting from there, or we were waiting since birth. But can you talk a little bit more about the waiting and the people that are frustrated about waiting?
I'm gonna start by saying that they're justified. This is centuries. I totally get it. I totally get it. However, change doesn't happen overnight, especially this kind of change that took 400 years to create. So it's going to take some time for actual change. And I alluded to this at the beginning of our talk. Real change doesn't happen right now. The big changes happens in a little bit after the protest, when everyone goes home and everyone goes back to work and the economy is back running and the TV is not talking about all of the protests and the looters and the things that are going on. And we don't talk about George Floyd and Ahmaud Ashbury anymore. That's when the change happens. When we can talk and continue to have, I know people are saying, I don't want to keep talking. I'm tired of talking. But right now, if you pay attention, Black folks are not the ones that have to talk. It's white individuals who are confronting how they feel and confronting their inherent biases. So I would say to that person, wait just a little bit longer. Allow things to unfold. But I don't mean wait in the sense of don't do anything and stay stagnant. I mean, allow those who need to step up, because at this moment, a lot of individuals are stepping up. And you continue to enhance your community by continuing to congregate with the individuals within your community, still trying to bring up solutions to the problem, creating solutions to the problem, whether it be from a local level, what's happening in your community, from a more bigger level when it's county, to a even greater level where it's our state. And hopefully that can take hold across the United States. But it all starts with where you're at. And if we're waiting for change, it won't happen. So we have to take an active stand in the process of change, allowing those that need to stand, but also still in the background, organizing together, having these discussions internally and externally, so that these topics don't get forgotten about and the issues don't get forgotten about, so that real change can happen, like reform and changes to our laws.
Yeah. I love it. I think that was very insightful. And I think that that's going to be helpful for a lot of people that have those questions or even those feelings come up of, I don't want to wait anymore. But I think that you hit it right on the head of we're not waiting to take a stand. We're not waiting to speak up. We're not waiting to say what's right or wrong. We're just waiting for the change now.
Let change catch up to, our progressions. We're letting our voice be heard. So now let's kind of sit back a little bit and allow the other side to listen, because that's what really needs to happen. The other side, we feel the other side hasn't listened. We've been talking about this. That's why they're tired of talking. It's like we've been talking about this. I'm sick of talking. Well, we've talked. Allow them to listen.
I appreciate everything that you shared with us. And I hope this is helpful for our audience of just knowing that, one, they're not alone. Two, their voices matter. Their feelings matter. And absolutely their lives matter. And, everything that you shared today, I think it gives us at least new insight, new perspective, and hopefully some new skills of just how to manage how we're feeling. I know you and I both are experiencing a lot of difficulty with this situation, especially with our professional capacity of being there to support others when even we're hurting with what's going on. Can you speak to a little bit about like what you've been doing for yourself?
Sure. For me, the big thing is talking to my wife. That's huge. Having that outlet, because we can't walk around with this stuff bottled up. So for you, it may not be a wife, it may not be a husband, it may not be. Find a trusted person, somebody that you feel safe with communicating the deeper things that you're thinking about or feeling. Find that person, and that's kind of what I've been able to do. But also some of the stuff I've had to take to my community. I had to talk to individuals who are suffering. Had to talk to family members who may be affected directly or indirectly by this whole thing, and have some of these tough conversations. But they're not new. So for my community, these aren't new conversations. We're just bringing them back up and revisiting them, and essentially trying to heal old wounds. So we're dealing with that, and in the background, I believe that there's a level of us who are dealing with some vicarious trauma. So I've had some talks about that with some of my community members and some of my family members, and how they're being affected by this whole situation, even though they're not on the front lines. And the big part is communicating, but also it's really just getting this energy out, exercising, meditating, speaking to trusted individuals, and really those have been the main things that have just helped me stay afloat to some degree on some levels, and then to get out of that thing and to kind of soar.
Yeah, great. I love it. I appreciate it so much. And, you know, just all of our interactions have just been so amazing. I think even when we're talking about such heavy content and heavy topics, and I appreciate you so much, and I value everything that you had to say today. And I hope that our viewers get to take something from it. But if they wanted more from Anthony, how can they contact you?
Sweet. First, you can contact me by email. It's acarson@hopeavenuecounseling.com. If you just have something you needed to speak about, or something I said struck a chord with you, feel free to write me an email. You can also find me at Hope Avenue CS on Hope Avenue CS on Twitter, and Hope Avenue Counseling on Facebook, and also Hope Avenue CS at Instagram.
Awesome. And I'm going to put links to all of Anthony's information down below. So if you want to get in touch with Anthony, please do. He's an amazing therapist. As you could see with the skills that he walked us through, and just the insight and perspective, and just that warm, open approach that he has, I absolutely value everything that you shared with us today, Anthony. And if anybody wants to contact him, please do so. His information is going to be below. And also, if you wanted to contact me, my information will be down below as well. Once again, thank you so much, Anthony, for taking your time to meet with us and share on these very hot, serious topics right now. Once again, I think it's interesting, and I don't think anything happens by coincidence. You know, our story of how we met and how we connected is just so phenomenal.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, it was, I want to say 2-3 months ago, where we set up this interview, and we pushed it back a little bit from when we really wanted to, and it was just going to be about anger management. And I think that there's no coincidence of just essentially everything that's going on in the world, and why we had to do this interview today of this topic, and just addressing these topics.
Absolutely. I want to first say thank you, man, for allowing me to your platform, allowing me to speak to your audience, and allow me to speak about this message, because there's a lot of us who are hurting, and we want to thank you for allowing us to uplift our voice. But also, you are also on the front lines and being a part of that change by provoking these types of conversations. And if your viewers haven't noticed, you've done a lot of listening. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, once again, thank you so much. Anthony Carson with Hope Avenue Counseling. Thank you.
Thanks, bud.